Hello guys, welcome back. And in today's session, we're going to talk about HTML colors. Okay, so let me just close all these previous session videos, and HTML colors is here. Now, what are colors? Obviously, colors are colors. They basically represent various different RGB values. And within our web pages, within our web designing, these are absolutely important to understand what colors and what color range we have available. So let's talk about colors in this today's session. So now, when we come inside HTML, there are certain pre-built defined colors that we can easily use, such as tomato, orange, red, green, blue, yellow, medium C, light green. These are all different colors. So if you click on try it yourself, you would find that, and we have talked about the heading one. So we have given various different headings here. The style tag is there. We have talked about style tag basically allows us to use CSS property. Now, what colors we are giving here is, for example, tomato. So if I give it the tomato color, this becomes a tomato red. Okay, and then if I give style as a background and then we specify orange, it becomes orange. Dodger blue will give a Dodger blue, medium green, and so on and so forth. So these are various different colors that we can use by default. All these names are there. If you go further, it says you can set the background color for HTML elements. So any HTML element you can use, you can set it to color. So for example, heading 1 can have the same style background color Dodger blue, so it will have the Dodger blue color. At the same time, we can have a tomato color for our paragraph tag. So if you set up a paragraph tag and you want to issue it its color in terms of tomato red, the background color of that text will be background color. The same way you can set the color of every component in terms of text as well. So if you have a text and you want to change its colors, you use the CSS property called tomato. Sorry, color. Okay. So we use a CSS property called color, and then we give it a color name as tomato, so it becomes tomato red. If you give it a CSS property as Dodger blue, this becomes a Dodger blue color. At the same time, we can use something called medium green, so it has a medium green color. So every time we need to change the color of a text, whether it's paragraph or heading or whatever quotation tags you are using, this same applies for across the board, across all tags. We use a style attribute is equals to, we use a CSS property called color and then medium green. If you want to set the background color of this, yes, you would be using additional property called background color. Okay, that's it. That's how we go about it. Then within CSS, we have something called border. Now again, this is CSS. Using CSS, as I said, we can do tons of stuff. Amongst setting the color and style and background color, there's something called border as well. So we can give border around a component, any component for that matter, whether it's heading, whether it's paragraph, whether it's an image, whether it's any block quotes you are using here, you can give that border around any component. To do that, you just use a border attribute, or within our CSS, we use a border property. We use a style attribute, we give a border property, and this time we have given it 2 pixels solid tomato. So let's just explore this border property a little bit more. This is again part of CSS. Now, if you want to learn CSS, do subscribe this channel, because I will be, after the HTML course, I will be creating an entire playlist of CSS, and we will be diving very deep into CSS as well, and we will be looking into CSS. So if you have already not subscribed, do subscribe and follow my channel for the complete courses on all of the major topics related web development, from CSS to Bootstrap and JavaScript, coming in next few months, hopefully. So let's begin with the border property for now. Within border property, we basically have certain different attributes, which are basically 2 pixels, meaning the 2 pixel wealth. We can change this to, for example, 5 pixels. So if I do that, it becomes 5 pixels wide. We can change it to, for example, 50 pixels. If you dare to do that, it will have a 50 pixel width. So depending on what you want to do on your web page, certain components have a bigger border or basically a bigger box around it, indicating that this is important, or whatever design style you want to apply. So this is PX, stands for pixels, how many pixels you want to cover. If you use 1 pixel at the moment minimum, it basically means it just has a 1 pixel of a border, so you can calculate how thick the border you want. Then we have solid, which basically means the type of border you want. Okay, so I can use something called dotted here. Again, this is CSS. So if I use dotted, now you can see we have a dotted border. I can use dashed here as well. For example, DASHED dashed. I believe if I spelled it correctly. Now you see there are small dashes here, and so on and so forth. You can also use a double, if I remember correctly from CSS. You can say, hey, I want a double border. If I click on run, nope, double doesn't work. So I think what was the correct name for this? Dashed, double, and double dash. Many other word options were there. Solid, dotted. I think it was double. If I'm forgetting something. I don't know, maybe. Let me double check on that. But anyway, so if you use solid, it is already by default solid. It has a dodger blue color, and hello world is displayed within our border area. So we use a style tag to give different border styles and border parameters: color name, the border style, and the width of the border. Again, this is CSS, so don't be confused with that. These are CSS. So to understand what are all these parameters and how we use them, what other values we can give, do follow and learn the CSS for me, and I will be talking about this CSS course using W3 as a reference website again. So moving on further, again here up till now we have been given the direct names which have been predefined for us. But then you can always use the RGB value or a hexadecimal value or HSL, hue, saturation and light value as well. So you, for example, to do that, you can go inside the background color and then you can call this RGB function. It's RGB stands for red, green and blue, and then you can give the values of RGB appropriately within this text. Similarly, H1 style tag, you can give what we call a hexadecimal color values, or you can give HSL values, RGBA values. These are different ways how the colors are calculated and generated within each of these systems. Most commonly, we do prefer to use RGB and hexadecimal values. What are RGB and hexadecimal values? If you come inside the RGB tab here, now it gives us that when you use this RGB function within your CSS property, you get red, you get green, you get blue, and each of these basically represent 255 colors of red, 255 colors of green, 255 colors of blue. This is what it says. So approximately 1.6 million colors are possible based on the combination of red, green and blue, and for a human eye 1.6 million are more than enough. So we can just easily use any color range within these RGB values. So to find the exact RGB values, there are some examples available on the W3 website schools as well. I will leave a link where you can find a detailed color chart of RGB values, but at the same time you can play around with these value as well. So if you use this red value, so for example, if I set the red to 0, the green is 99, the 71 is blue, this becomes this sea green, I don't know what you call it. If I set it to 0, this becomes a green. Now I can play with various different variations of green color. So you see this, because red is 0, blue is 0, means there is no red, no blue. Now I'm getting different variations of blue from 0 to 255. As soon as I start adding some blue to it, I will get more different tones of green. I can reduce the green to 0. I can play with the tones of value and I can get RGB very easily here. So W3 Schools has this amazing tool that you can use to customize and get exact tone of color that you want, and you can find the RGB values for that particular color range and then use this color palette within your code as well. So there are certain built-in examples at what you can do. So if you set RGB to 255 and the green 0, blue 0. This means there is no green, no blue, only 255 value of red. Hence, we get what we call pure red color. Okay, as soon as you start mixing green with it, you start to get different shades of red as well as if you include blue, then you get a different values with that. So these are RGB, and you can similarly use different shades of gray by combining these values. So if you set RGB to 60, 60, 60, you get a dark gray. If you set to 100, 100, 100, almost, in other words, the rule of thumb is the same values for all three. So if I come back inside my tool here, if I set it to, for example, 138, and if I come back here and set it to 138 again, if I can manage, and then I can say 138 similarly, so you can see this, it's a roughly a green, blue, gray, dark gray shade color. Okay, so any gray combination, basically you play around with these things. If you need to have a pure colors, just set it to 000 means pure black, set it to 255, 255, 255 means pure white. Okay, that's the rule of thumb that we follow within these gray shades color. Okay, similarly HX values, if I come jump into it, these are basically HX or hexadecimal values as we call them. So these are hexadecimal colors specified with hash RRGGBB. So RR represents red, GG green, and evidently B for blue. So where R is the red, green and blue, these are what we call a hexadecimal color values. So each hexadecimal color value has a different parameter from 0 to F. Okay, so from 0 to F, there's a specific value for each red, green and blue. And again, you can achieve the same combination of colors using this wonderful tool by W3 Schools, and you can achieve different color values in terms of hexadecimal. So sometimes we use RGB, sometimes we use hexadecimal as well. Most of the time you would find that in CSS and Bootstraps, we tend to go with hexadecimal color values. they are just easy to work with in other similar sense. So we have hexadecimal numbers. Do remember that these are like uh, same color range in terms of red, red, green, green, blue, blue. So if I need to achieve the dark grayish shade, I make sure that all the shade numbers are exactly same, and this will basically generate the say gray shade, and then any combination of these will generate different values with it. So if I have FF, that means that 255 pure of red, and then all other values are 0 and 0, and I can get the generate blue color. Similarly, vice versa, if I set it to FF to blue and set the green to 0, I get pure blue and green in evidently. Okay, so this is how basically we work and play with the colors in HTML. Okay, very simply we use this chart and find an exact palette. Within W3Schools, I believe there is a very nice color palette as well. I will try to search it and put the color range here. If I think this one is where, if I check here, so you see this, yeah, this is a very nice color palette. So if you scroll down, you will find this HTML reference, HTML colors, and within this HTML colors, you will find this very nice color palettes that you can use with its hexadecimal values. Any color range that you want to use, you can use this number, and then you can further customize it using the hexadecimal tool values. Okay, so this has ton of color ranges that you can use for your reference sake from this point as well, or you can just Google it out and you will find these wonderful color ranges within your system. Okay, so I hope this explains the basic concepts of color, how we use them. If I scroll up, next we're now going to talk about CSS in little bit more detail with respect to HTML and how we use CSS with HTML.